All right, so I just clicked live on YouTube. Do you guys see that?
Yeah, let's
No, I'm
go.
not looking,
Oh,
but I believe you.
no. Okay, there's an icon that pops up here in Zoom.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're officially live, everybody.
Yes.
James.
No, I'm not looking. I'm hearing feedback.
All right,
there's an
live. What's up,
icon that pops up.
everybody?
Hold on.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Good to be presenting today, and we set up an info session on every California ballot measure and we're gonna give a brief explanation of all of them. I'm James Brown.
And I'm Jaleel Baker. We both work with the Sacramento NAACP Youth Council. We're very excited to have everybody in this room here. But we definitely are excited for this event because this is an opportunity for us to just talk about every proposition and make sure that people know what's going on, what's going to be on the ballot, and just make sure that they know both sides and what's going on. So we're going to talk first with Miss Lynn Berkeley Baskin, who is serving on the Sacramento NAACP Adult Branch Executive Committee and serves with a number of other service organizations and activist organizations in Sacramento. She's also, most importantly, has began working with her own organization with a number of other people, Justice to Jobs, working on the criminal justice reform. Please welcome Miss Lynn Berkeley Baskin. Hello.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm excited. A little bit nervous. You all probably know a lot more about these propositions than I do, but I'm game. I'm game. Okay.
That's probably not true, y'all. But thank you so much for joining us and being here with us. We're really excited. So let's go ahead and just get right into the propositions. We're going to be going into just a quick explanation for some of them and then a more detailed conversation for others. So James, why don't you go ahead and take us off?
So how it'll go is basically we'll have a brief explanation of what it does, the main purpose of the ballot measure, and then after we'll talk about the immediate effects because of COVID-19 and everything, and 2020 generally being very unpredictable. It's good to know what the effects will be immediately after it's passed and how that'll impact things right now, because some of the measures will kind of be correlated. The measures may correlate and kind of have an effect based on what COVID is like, and some of the props in particular, like Prop 16, stuff like that, may influence how things are in California more because of what's going on in the world and COVID and everything. So for the start, we'll go into Prop 14, which is basically stem cell research and an institutive bond initiative. So it's going to authorize $5.5 billion in general obligation bonds for the state stem cell research institute, and it'll make changes in the institute's governance structure for the programs. $1.5 billion will go to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, stroke, epilepsy, and other brain and central nervous system conditions, and the total cost will be roughly $7.8 million. But this research will begin the moment the initiative is passed, and the funds will start to be allocated towards this cause for the stem cell research, which, currently, we all know how important health is and health and research is. So that's kind of what the main purpose of that proposition is. So yeah, any extra comments from you, Jalil or Lynn?
So it mentions bringing up a bond in general obligation bonds, and this would go directly towards a medicine research institute. So to me, it sounds like we have just a bill that or a proposition that is going to be directing more funding towards a research institution for stem cell research. Do we have any idea about where this money might be coming from or anything like that? Lynn, do you know anything about that?
Well, it's definitely coming from the state. I think the important part about this proposition is that it takes, oftentimes research is done with a bias, right? This is going, and I'm not going to say that any research has no bias, right? All research has a bias, but it's a lot better to take the research out of the agencies that are going to be implementing the outcomes of the research. So this is going to be put in an independent area as opposed to the state doing the research or the state. So it will be an independent body, which is it's the best way you can do research is to have an independent body.
Right. And just to be clear, a yes vote on this would support that the money would go to this independent body for research, and a no vote would prevent any extra additional monies or bonds to go to this research institution. Does that sound about right to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
process, getting the process started after, will start pretty much immediately after the prop is passed. The funds will begin being allocated to that research. I guess you want to start on Prop 15, Julia, or do you?
Yeah,
Can I
definitely.
make one more point about 14 before we move?
Sure, go ahead.
Just really quick is
Yeah.
that oftentimes people vote no on things because of cost, and this does have a cost.
Right.
And I think that we have to, as a community, recognize that sometimes the benefits are not always seen in profit. Sometimes benefits are seen in quality of life.
Right.
And so whatever this research is doing, and usually it's medical research, right? That public dollars are supposed to be used for increasing quality of life, especially for things that are about the public good, for people who have been marginalized. So in this case, this independent research will be used to help quality of life for people who might not otherwise have it.
I agree.
Thank you, Lynn. That's
Yeah.
definitely a great point to add there. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to Prop 15. These are some props that just are general funding type of props that come on the ballot pretty much every year. So let's go ahead and quickly go over 15 as well, James.
Yes. So Proposition 15, it's the commercial and industrial property tax increase for school measure. So it basically increases funding for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by the increase of commercial and industrial property taxes. So it basically there will be a tax increase for. So there will be a slight property tax increase, but the funds will go directly to schools, community colleges, and local government services that relate to education and everything. So these taxes increases will happen fairly. It will, I believe. So it has a timeline. So this change will be put in place over time up to 2022. 2022, and the change will not start generally before 2025 for the properties used by California businesses that meet certain rules and have 50 or fewer employees. So there are some specifics to this bill, but with the timing and everything. But the main purpose of it is to begin to gradually increase property taxes to put the money towards schools and other income. Yeah.
And I just want to definitely add that the group that is getting the increased taxes is specifically landowners that are over and own properties that are buildings normally over $3 million, and that's where the increase is going to. And so, yeah, Lynn, if you want to add anything on that, I can. Okay, so I'll go ahead and
You're good.
I want to make it clear that a yes vote supports this proposition to require commercial and industrial properties, except for those zoned as commercial agriculture. So agriculture is protected in this in terms of increased tax, but this will be a requirement to be taxed on their market value rather than their purchase price. And all that means is that as the market continues to grow, and as these landowners are are holding onto these properties for longer, they're going to be charged the fair market rate price and being taxed at that. And currently that repeals a prop that was passed where they were only taxed on the purchase price. And so this money is also going to be, all this increase in taxing is going to be redistributed into community and education and local government funding initiatives, which is a clear redistribution of private money from taxes back into state and local government. So that's what a yes on this proposition would support. And a no would make sure that they would stay. Prop 13, which is in place now, is that they would continue to be taxed on their purchase price and have essentially a lower tax and not have an additional money or an additional tax on these landowners being funneled or redistributed into the community or to the state government. So that's what a yes and no vote on Prop 15 means. But I think we're all really excited about this next one, right?
Well, wait, one more comment on this, on Prop 15.
Okay, good.
The addition of this will also be, of course, in the middle of the pandemic. So the instant impact, the increase in school funds could also be beneficial. It may be able to get some children laptops and it give them the supplies to attend school in a better environment. So that's also something to note. That'd be kind of an immediate impact. But yeah, Prop 16, let's get on to it.
Okay, Prop 16. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's
No, you do your regular, I'll chime in.
Okay. We'll introduce the Prop 16. I'll go ahead and introduce this one if that's all right, James.
Yeah, do it. Go ahead.
Okay, so Prop 16, this is something that is definitely affecting a lot of marginalized and minority groups. And this is about affirmative action. So we want to start getting away from the numbers because we know that can be confusing. And so essentially what Prop 16 does is it's an amendment to the California Constitution, whereas in the past and recently with Prop 209, California decided that it's not a good idea to have affirmative action. It's not a good idea to allow the state to give monies to certain protected groups based on that group and only to that group. Now, this is a definite hot topic issue. It's been in the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court, it's been in the California Supreme Court, and now it's here on the direct initiative and ballot process again. And giving people an opportunity to weigh in on the discussion about whether or not it's necessary to start funneling and giving money specifically to different groups and based on their protected class specifically. So this, people oftentimes think that this has to do with a protection against discrimination, and it does include a protection against discrimination, but it also includes the ability to give discretionary funding to a specific group of people. So that is what we want to open this discussion about. We want to talk a little bit about what are the impacts of a yes vote on Prop 16 and how how not having affirmative action in California, what the impact of that has been if we move forward without it. So we'll go ahead and defer to Lynn now on this one. Just if there's anything you want to add about Prop 16, and then James and I will feel free to comment and add some questions.
Let's just have a conversation about Prop 16. Right. So, Jaleel, you and I have actually off screen talked about how we're seeing these signs pop up everywhere that say Prop 16, no on Prop 16, don't divide us, which to me is so laughable. Right. Because it assumes that we're not divided now. And what Proposition 209 did is it assumed the same thing. It was like, oh, of course, we're not divided anymore. We're a post-racial society. We have, and now, of course, that kind of morphed into President Obama, and people even were validated more and thinking, well, look, now we have a Black president. But we know by evidence, we know the evidence of employment evidence, we know the evidence in enrollment in higher educational institutions, that it actually has hurt certain groups terribly. And so this would be a situation for Prop 16, where it actually, a yes vote will unify us. It doesn't divide us, it will actually create more equity. And I think the problem with that is the people who are thinking about it as a no vote are thinking that because there's got to be somebody who gives up something. If there's only 500 pieces of the pie and Black people don't have, maybe they have one piece of that pie and we're going to take 3 more pieces or 10 more pieces, then, or women, the same thing, whatever protected group we're talking about, are going to take more pieces, that means that there are less pieces for somebody else. And so the people fighting against this are people who are afraid of losing their pieces of the pie, but they're really not looking for equity. They're looking at protecting the dominance of their own position.
Definitely.
I agree. Yeah, there's inherent bias, and I mean, with systematic racism, you can't really, with the way things are right now, you can't really say that you're preserving equality because the system isn't equal yet. We're not at that point, and we probably won't. Unfortunately, we won't be at that point for a long time. So this is a countermeasure to get closer to that right now until we can get to the point of real equality and equity. We shouldn't need something like this, but unfortunately, that's just the way things are right now. We can't. It'd be nice to just say, oh well, if you have this, then you're giving people an inherent advantage, when unfortunately there are studies that show African American names have a lower chance of getting employment just off of names. That's ridiculous, and stuff like that. That is why it kind of is counterintuitive to say no on it. It's like a contradiction of sorts. You say it's to preserve equality, but the system in general isn't equal yet. So that's kind of just the way things are, and we have to accept that it's not as much about equality as it is not wanting things to change and things to stay the same, because it changes the rules overall and makes it so that policies have to change and companies have to hire different people, schools have to select different students, and that's not, they don't want to do that. They want to keep things the same, but ultimately it's unrealistic for them to argue about equality and still want things to stay this way.
So yeah, I mean, we have to be really clear about what not having affirmative action in California does, and it prevents, you know, state funding, local, local government from being able to just distribute money specifically to one group. And there's plenty of reason to, and a myriad of issues to distribute funding to one group. And, there's a lot of negative effects that have been discussed about affirmative action, just in general, being the lay of the land, where, okay, you're not able to, say which group you want to give this money to, but you have to provide it to, now we're in a discussion of, okay, we're going to give these resources to a much broader group of people. And now, communities and governments and agencies are able to kind of, decide based on a backdoor, routines on who gets the funding, right? Rather than having a very narrow group and still kind of, weighing in on that. I do think that, adding Prop 16 will allow people to give specific communities and specific peoples monies, grants, that is definitely needed. And to assume that we are in this, and that it's detrimental to give preferential treatment to some group is the direct opposite of equity. I mean, equity is about giving preferential treatment to people that have been marginalized and oppressed, and to get to a level playing field. So it's necessary to get some additional funding for specific people. It makes people turn their ears off. They're like, wait a minute, they're the only group that's going to be able to get it. But this allows for everybody to be getting some sort of resource based on their identity, which is great. We just have to fight to get that.
Agreed.
Yeah, this is, oh, go ahead, James.
You can go first.
Oh, I appreciate it. So I just, you said exactly the problem too. So yes, we should be investing in groups that have been, separated from somehow capitalizing, and I use that word in quotes, on the system, right? We know that when Prop 209 passed, it basically started to unroll all of the things that have happened positively for those groups who had been invested in to try and change the outcomes of what we knew were true. I think in 2013 we saw the Voting Rights Act roll back. of course, and that was nationally, of course. Then with Prop 209, as we look forward, we're seeing a reinvestment in the school to prison pipeline, because we also know at that time that when you're barred from education and you're barred from employment, that criminalization goes up. And Michelle Alexander talks about that. Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about that. And I think that if we understand that giving money in a moment is not about inequity in that moment, it's about changing the entire picture so that everybody is included in the entire picture over the long term. So this is something that we're doing now with Prop 16 to figure out how to change the system so that we can lift up everyone, especially people who have been disenfranchised.
Definitely.
And again, bringing it back to the present, COVID-19, the worst pandemic that this country has seen in a long time, and the worst, along with the worst stock market crash and business failure, like as far as businesses going down and overall production and employment going like down to the levels of the Great Depression. The marginalized groups are not doing well right now. They are feeling the impact of it first. And without the support of actions like affirmative action, we will continue to be in this position. And there's really no straight way out of it unless there is some help. I mean, there's a way, but the purpose of the government is to assist groups that are marginalized and have been marginalized, and this is the way to do it. Especially right now, if this passes, then those groups will have a better chance of employment and better funding for businesses and loans. It will go a long way, especially right now, because if we don't, then the effects will continue to be felt and just become worse and worse, snowballing into something that is maybe not unchangeable, but will be a lot harder to change than if it doesn't pass.
That's right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this discussion up by just clarifying exactly what yes and a no vote means. Okay, so a yes vote would, this is a constitutional amendment, and what this would do is allow, and it would repeal past amendments and allow the government and public institutions to discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to persons on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in public employment, public education, and public contracting. So again, the language is sometimes tough to understand, but why this is the language that we want to highlight here is that it will allow preferential treatment to protected classes and identities for public employment, public education, and public contracting. And a no vote would oppose this, and it would keep the Constitution the same, which states that the government is not allowed to grant preferential treatment to certain groups in those fields of public education, employment, and contracting. And so it would keep the status quo the same, allowing public institutions to only give out aid and resources, not based on a protected class, but based on things that are not within there, on income or geography or something like that. So those are that's where the status quo is. And that's what a no vote would continue, is keeping the Constitution the way it is and allowing our government not to grant preferential treatment and equity programs and things like that to specific groups. So
one more quick thing. So discrimination, that word, the fact that that's in there is also very misleading, because the definition of discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people's things, especially on the grounds of race, sex, and age. It's not like that. It's I absolutely agree with you, Jalil. That highlighting that preferential treatment is important. That's really like where the bill, that's kind of where it should have ended, was with that, not necessarily discriminating,
Yeah, and that's just, the jargon of it sometimes gets a little wishy-washy, but we know that the people that have brought up this bill were brought up this constitutional amendment in the legislature and got this into the initiative, or supported by the California Legislative Black Caucus. This is something that the NAACP is proud have a yes vote on. So these are
If I could just interject there, Jaleel, just so you know too, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I also want you to add others to that. So do you have others that I could add?
yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
So because, the Jewish community in California is supporting this. A lot of the economic community, the chambers, a lot of the chambers are, supporting this. So I just wanted to interject that. So I'm sorry please forgive me for interrupting you, but yeah, I just wanted to add those.
Sounds like a wide variety of, ethnic groups and people that are protected under this clause that would want to support and get some sort of treatment because they may have been disadvantaged in the past. So there's a good coalition behind the yes on Prop 16. So let's go ahead and let's make sure to tell people about that. If this is a very exciting proposition, we want to make sure that we can start to roll back some of the rollbacks that they did. So that's what this is about. So we can go ahead and move on to the next proposition. James, do you want to go ahead and introduce that one?
Yeah, I'll start. So it's pretty simple. So if you have a felony conviction but are on parole, you're able to vote, which is fair. You served your time. You have gotten out of jail. You're on parole now. You should be able to vote. You served your sentence. You faced the punishment for your crimes, and you are being reintegrated into society, and not being able to vote is insulting. It's pretty straightforward. That's what it is. I really don't know. I can't really think of anything else to say about it because that's just the basics of what it is. But I did have a question for Lynn. I'm guessing this rule includes misdemeanors as well, or
no, it's felony specific.
Which,
okay,
yeah.
so I wanted to interject here and just say that currently the California Constitution and just the judicial system in general disenfranchises people as soon as they enter into, some sort of felony sentence or imprisonment, and it allows that people are not able to vote or participate in the process ever again. Right? If they get a felony, they're not able to execute or exercise the right to vote. Even if they come out, even if they successfully reintegrate into society, even if they are let out on good behavior or whatever, so if you're on parole, this proposition essentially would say that, hey, you are an active member of society now. You're back into the community, and we want to start making sure that you feel like you can exercise a right, or you can participate in this system, that you aren't a part of a fringe group that is coming out. You're someone that we want to re-enter society and have some rights. So this is another constitutional amendment. And this constitutional amendment would allow people that are out on parole to vote. So let's go ahead and open this up to discussion some more and talk about the impacts, the significance of a proposition like this. So Lynn, why don't you take us there?
Yeah, so I'm so impassioned, and I apologize that I am so impassioned because then I interrupt and I'm trying to control myself. So I think that with this one in particular, James is right. It's pretty straightforward. This is really much about ideologies. If somebody is all about punitive and making sure that criminalization happens, then you're going to vote no. For many of us who understand that criminalization is inequitable, it is not just. So this is not a criminal justice system. This is a criminal legal system. It's a system of a punitive bureaucracy that disproportionately affects Black and brown, I will say Black and brown men, because it disproportionately affects Black and brown people. But it also, to be honest, actually the statistics are showing that women are rising faster even than men at this point. But anyway, the point is that it's disproportionately affecting Black and brown people. Yeah. And if we want to continue disenfranchising an entire group of people, right, then you're going to vote no on this. And if you want to understand that we have to make this more of a system of inclusion, we can't make it punitive. We actually have to change the whole system. This is a very, very tiny step forward to make sure that people feel like they're not disenfranchised, and that they can actually affect the system that's been because of restoring voting rights, of course. They can affect the system that's been disenfranchising them and disenfranchising our neighbors and our families. And so I think that's the big point of this is that it ends a little small piece of felony disenfranchisement. And I say that because as significant as this is and important as it is, we have to recognize this is not the end of felony disenfranchisement. It's just the very small beginning.
So I just wanted to give an example on this. So say someone gets a DUI, right? Sacramento County. That's a felony, right? And I think they thought it was a felony.
I don't know. I think it can be a felony.
Okay. So, well, let's say if somebody gets a felony charge and say that it's, a nonviolent crime, they go into prison or jail for a year to 2 and come out. It's their first crime. Let's say they grew up and went to high school and whatever crime it was, that they went into and served a year to 2 and come out on parole. So with that, do we think that in this group, do we think that someone should not have the right to vote ever again based on an 18-year-old decision that they made that they've been incarcerated with? Do you guys really think that any criminal should never have the chance to vote again? Do y'all think that people inside prison right now should be able to vote?
Yep. Voting rights should never be taken away, ever. It's just, personally, on a personal note, I don't even think that our system of I think punitive justice is like putting 2 words together that don't even belong together, right?
I'm starting to become a lawyer. And one thing that I fear so much about the justice system is how much power the prosecution has compared to the defense. The justice system in general seems to skew towards the prosecution and the punishment side of it, and not necessarily the rehabilitation and stuff like that. It feels like that's kind of the focus, is just getting the punishment out and making sure there's some kind of feeling of revenge for the prosecuting party. But it's not as much about the helping the defense party and getting them back into society, rehabilitating them. It's not as much about that. And that side of it, taking away a right to vote about something that directly affects you, about policies that will directly affect you no matter who you are, it doesn't make any sense. Because no matter what you've done, these policies will affect you. And as long as that is a factor, you should be able to vote. If it affects you, why shouldn't you be able to vote? If somebody is going to do something to you directly or indirectly, which it is directly because policies directly affect you, you should be able to vote. That's as simple as that. At least that's from my perspective. And that's
where America really gets off anyway, thinking that just because someone commits a crime, that their whole life is just, you're not participating anymore. That's a literal, taken away because of a crime, right? And, I just think that we have to be careful about how we talk about it within the community, and that this is, like Lynn has mentioned, it's only a small step, right? But it's something that we know would give a lot more people the opportunity to vote. It's a step in the right direction. And, personally, we're just tired of seeing that, in existing within a system that allows for this type of behavior. It's over policing and over punishing people for and taking them, and it's intentional, right? The system isn't designed that way so that they can try and start taking more and more people out of the picture, disenfranchising more and more people from having the opportunity to vote, for having the opportunity to re-enter society. This reminds me of the discussion about, marking the box and whether or not you have to or you can hire people that have criminal convictions. I mean, do we want people to really rehabilitate and re-enter to society? Do we really care about the people that have been, under-resourced and pretty much trapped into a system where they end up in getting over-policed on a minor conviction and their life is ruined and entered into a cycle that is on repeat, So this is something that at least would allow them to have the right to vote if they're out on parole. So,
closing this off, I'm going to say 2 words, and this is not a case in California specifically, but it speaks to the greater issue with the justice system. Kalief Browder. It's a perfect example of someone convicted, sent to Rikers Island, got out, and was not the same, and ended up committing suicide. And
never should have been there in the first place. That has a lot to do with bail.
Rights taken away, his liberties taken away, his life taken away by a justice system based in prosecution. His right to vote, gone as well. For a backpack that they didn't have any physical evidence of him stealing. That's a perfect example of why Prop 17 should pass, because his rights are taken away for really no reason at all, for an accusation of all things.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I would like to say too, if we kind of switch this, I did look up the DUIs. Most DUIs are misdemeanors, but to your point earlier, and to your point, James, is this whole system is meant to disenfranchise, right? So again, the propositions that we're discussing, if we look at it through an equity lens, they're all part of this bigger system, right? We're talking about investing in schools. We're talking about investing in employment. We're talking about investing in quality of life issues. And then we're also talking about investing in people who have had some rights taken away. And the more we think about it, of the people who are affected by having things taken away, more often than not, are Black and brown people. And so if we are to continue looking at a punitive system, then we have to start really looking at who is being monitored and held accountable, because our punitive system hangs out mostly in Black and brown communities. It doesn't hang out in our white communities. And so I think that people who are looking at this as, oh, well, you did the crime and now you have to be held accountable for that crime, and that means you're going to lose all of your rights, or most of your rights. And so, by the way, we're going to continue to over-criminalize the people who look like you and people who live in areas like you, so that you're all in one place and we can totally disenfranchise an entire people. And this is a very angering, the fact that this is even on the ballot, or has to be on the ballot, is angering, because everyone should have their rights to vote, everyone. And of course, people who have misdemeanors or who are in jail, they do have the right to vote. And I hope they exercise that right. And I hope that our jailers make sure that they have access to exercise that right, which is a whole other issue. But to wrap up, yeah, I think these, to make people who have felony convictions, and by the way, they're on parole. So parole is supposed to be a step to integrate back into society. It's no longer considered, the public eye looks at it as punitive, but from a legal perspective, the point of it is supposed to be a step in transition. That's all. It's not supposed to continue their incarceration, their carceral, history.
Yeah. So to wrap up, a vote, I'll pull Jalil, the vote yes for this is will allow people on probation with felonies to be able to vote in all elections, primaries, general, everything. And a vote no will make it so that they cannot vote and have to just let the election go by while they don't vote. Essentially, that's what what it'll do. Jalil, I can start on the next one, or you? It's up to you.
Yeah, go ahead, man. Prop 18 is definitely another exciting topic for us. So I think all three of us are ready to talk about this one. So let's go.
Yes. Okay, so I just graduated high school, so this applies to many of my peers and friends who were 17 during the general primary elections of the United States, who were watching the debates. We talked about it in government class and everything. So this would drastically engage people on a drastically greater level than anything we've seen before for youth. We have voting pre-registration, and that's great. I pre-registered the moment I had gotten my license, but the fact that now there's actual engagement and research into candidates, primary candidates for your party, it's great, and that's kind of the direction. That's a great first step to getting to increasing the voting age and having youth engage in the political process, but this rule does only apply to students who are 17 in a general or in a primary election that are ready to be, or that are going to become 18 in a general, which I think is fair. That's a fair compromise to kind of put it in the right direction. So it's not just outright 17-year-olds are able to vote. 17-year-olds are able to vote in a primary with their party. And if they have a party figured out at that point, they're probably already fairly politically engaged into politics. But even if not, having a conversation with your parents or your friends may get you kind of into that mindset. So that's I like it a lot. The most it'll cost is $2 million every 2 years, or $1 million every 2 years for voting resources. But I mean, to me, that's not that much for all of California. All 17-year-old Californians to be able to start engaging in the political process.
Yeah, and before we pass it over to Lynn here, no, one thing that I would want to add about this is that you're right. Like 17-year-olds these are people that are already going to be 18 by the general election. And essentially, if they're going to be able to be 18 and by everybody's standard and laws that is agreed upon right now, that 18-year-olds are qualified and allowed to vote, it really doesn't make much sense that they aren't able to participate in who they're going to vote for in that November election. So this is really a very simple addition. It's saying, hey, okay, we already have pre-registered 16-year-olds are allowed to pre-register to vote, but hey, a 17-year-old should be able to vote that's going to be voting in the November election already. They should be able to decide and choose and pick in on the primary election. And it's simply just, primaries are definitely less populated and less engaged in. Young people have a high engagement rate when it comes to elections. This is an idea to allow people that are already going to be voting the opportunity to get engaged earlier into the process. But don't even get me started on talking about how early people should be able to vote, because young people are motivated and engaged and have this schooling system that is surrounding them. So they're already going to be engaged within it just by nature when it compared to some of our older and middle-aged voters. So that's just some of the information on this proposition here. But it's just, I wanted to clear up that it's primary voting for 17-year-olds to vote in the primary election before the general election. So Lynn, what are your thoughts on this proposition?
I think it's a no-brainer. Right? Students should be able to vote in the election period. If the age is appropriate for the general election and it wasn't for the primary, then we need to change that to make sure that they can exercise their right to vote, period.
I agree. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward as well.
Yeah.
If you say yes to this, then 17-year-olds that are eligible to vote in a general election will be able to vote in the primary election the previous year if they're 17. So like seniors mainly, like if you're 17 as a senior in a primary election, you can vote for your primary candidate in California. And then in a general election, you'll be able to, if you're 18 by general election. So yeah, mainly seniors. A lot of my friends would have benefited from this, and probably ask me
Yeah, and they would have been able to
questions.
weigh in on the presidential election and who the candidate would have been in California. And that's important, you know, and it will include, if they're able to have that part of the process, they'll be able to continue to be a part of the process in the future. So this is a great opportunity.
Ooh, you're lagging out a bit, Shalil. I think you're kind of frozen here. Oh, yeah, you're good now. Okay, good. Proposition 19. This was a little complicated for me to understand, but I think I'm starting to get a handle of the specifics now. No, it's all good. So what it is it basically it gives the right for eligible homeowners to transfer their tax assessments anywhere within the state and it'll allow tax expense or assessments to be transferred to a more expensive home with an upward adjustment. Yeah, and then it'll increase the number of times persons that are 55 and years or older with severe disabilities. It gives them more of an opportunity to transfer their tax assessments from 1 to 3, and it requires that inherited homes are not used as principal residences, such as second homes or rentals, be reassessed at market value when transferred, and it allocates additional revenue or net savings resulting from ballot measure to wildfire agencies and counties. So these effects will be immediately taking place after it is passed on the ballot. So a yes to this would allow all of these changes in tax assessment, and a no to this would not. Lynn, do you have anything to add to this? Because
No, I think you've done a great job. Overall, to me, when I look at these propositions, I look at who's impacted. And without a doubt, the people who will be impacted positively will be our older community members, will be people who have suffered in the wildfires, you know, and other groups. And of course, you know, I think there's a part in here too, and I don't know too much. But yeah, I think to me that the impacts of this are pretty clear of who gains and who loses. And it's people who are often in a situation, right? They're older or they've been impacted by something negative.
Yep. Anything to add, Jalil?
No, yeah, this is great. Yes vote on that. It definitely seems like there's some more freedom and ability for people to kind of, you know, decide what they want to do with their tax assessments. And essentially that, to me, that means how much they're giving back in taxes on certain properties and which property they get to decide that on. And that does come into play if you own multiple properties or own a property and your property has been, you know, affected by a fire or something like that. This will allow some more protections in that end. So yeah, I do think that it's a complicated proposition, but it does affect a voter base that we are familiar with in California, and which is older landowners, people that are in wildfire areas that need a little bit more protections, it sounds like. So that's what this proposition is all about. So yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the next one, James.
Agreed. I feel like you might want to start on this one, huh?
Yeah, so Prop 20, I mean, Lynn actually probably is the one that wants to.
No, you go ahead. Let's keep with the rhythm, good rhythm.
No, I was just saying that she's probably equally as passionate about Prop 20 as I am. So Prop 20 is an opportunity for law enforcement to increase the punishment and sentencing for a certain class of nonviolent crimes. So for Prop 20, what we have here is it makes changes to policies related to criminal sentencing and prison release for some categories are theft and fraud that are considered wobbler crimes that are chargeable as misdemeanors or felonies. Would increase those charges to felony charges. And it also requires the DNA collection for certain misdemeanors, so it is allowing law enforcement the opportunity to dig into some personal privacy type of rights there to support the the carceral system and support their investigations on misdemeanor crimes. So this definitely is a step in the over policing and over sentencing direction. It seems to be in response to a lot of the recent propositions that have moved to take prison populations and decarcerate prisons. This is clear to incarcerate people for longer sentences and for petty crimes. So yeah, let's start talking about it. This is a fun one. Is there any crimes on here that you think are egregious? Is there anything in here that you think is
this is an egregious proposition. So right, to me this is a grab by people who want other people to be criminalized. These are these are like law and order people who want to vote yes on this. They don't have an equity lens at all. They really only think of things in two ways. Did you do the crime or not? There's no context to the crime. There's no understanding of what's happened to a human being. And there's no consideration of what that human being is going to go through after they've been further criminalized. Right. And so this is a rollback of this is an attempt to roll back a lot of our former propositions. And this is also related to AB 109, which was a realignment that happened after our state was right with the United States Supreme Court. We ended up having losing, our state lost, and we were ordered to release a certain amount of people in state prisons because we were overly incarcerating. Gee, what a surprise. Right. And so then we put people in our local jails so that we can lower the prison count. And then we also did something called Prop 47 and Prop 57, which were changing what people were incarcerated for so that we could make sure that we rolled back some of these reasons for overly incarcerating. So this is a systemic root part of how our system works, is that people who just believe in the moment and say, oh, you did the crime, and so therefore you should be punished. Those are the people who are making this whole system bigger, criminalizing more people, this is a racist system, so they're being totally complicit to a racist system. And they're also affecting our budgets. This is going to cost millions and millions of dollars. Prop 20 is going to hit our budgets hard if we pass it. And so, again, the people who like Prop 20 and say yes, they're saying, well, we need to make sure that we don't have these criminals on the street. They should pay their time, pay their dues. And I would say that for me, and I'll just speak personally here, not representing any organization, but until we understand that criminalizing people and causing punitive responses is actually making our system worse and less safe, then we're at a standstill. So we're just going to have to keep fighting and fighting and fighting to help people to understand that something like this will roll back, over a decade of, or not quite a decade, I'm exaggerating, almost a decade of moving in a direction of decriminalizing and stopping mass incarceration. And so now it seems like we have some backlash. And I think that backlash is largely by our white population, largely.
Yeah. I can go ahead and mention a couple people, which is interesting. You mentioned the white population, but one of the main proponents of Prop 20 is all of our faves. Just kidding. Assemblymember Jim Cooper, who is a proud supporter of Prop 20, along with the Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. and a number of other conservative legislators and police unions who support, increasing the incarceration and sentences for some of these crimes. I just wanted to mention a couple of the crimes are one of the is a property crime. It says for some property crimes of more than $250, such as serial shoplifting and car
Oh my
theft,
God.
would be felonies rather than misdemeanors. And we've had a robust discussion about what it does just to enter people into the incarceration system and how this, disenfranchises and eliminates people from participating in society based on something as simple as a $250 shoplifting charge, or, and which are all, we know that there's a lot of drivers that influence that type of behavior. But a punitive justice system like that, which is suggested in Prop 20, is just a step in the wrong direction and towards continuing mass incarceration, and towards continuing disenfranchising larger groups of people for longer periods of time. And like you brought up the Supreme Court case, I don't know how they even get off with trying to, push something like this when
Right.
we've already ruled that mass incarceration and over sentencing and over crowding of prisons is not, usual punishment, anything but cruel. So Prop 20 is definitely supported by a lot of pro-police unions, and the ACLU is proudly against this bill or proposition, and same with Governor Gavin Newsom in the California Democratic Party. So those are some interesting insights on who is supporting and against this proposition. But like Lynn has said, it's very clear a power grab to swing the pendulum back in the direction of mass incarceration, which is like, wow, thank you.
Can I add one more piece too? Is that this is also, I think people should look at this as this reactionary kind of proposition.
Right.
Is that it doesn't, there isn't a lot of intellectual thought around how the system got to that Supreme Court situation to begin with. There isn't a lot of thought about, gee, it's going to cost us all this money. Where could we better use that money? So we know that if we reinvest in communities who have been over criminalized and totally disenfranchised economically, then we know that we can prevent more people from being in desperate situations. Or I would also say that there are lots of people who are incarcerated wrongly, and they didn't do the crime that they were convicted of. And so, but because there's so much emphasis put on the validity of what happens in that moment and not a lot of context, then we just go by that little moment. And again, I think this is a horrendous, this is inhumane to do something like this.
Yes, thank you. Can you go ahead and add a little bit on the DNA collection portion of this?
Oh yeah, totally forgot. That's a whole other thing. So in the Black and Brown community, we don't even talk about the fact that DNA by and large is not being regulated. There's not a lot of accountability around the collection of DNA. So we have a lot of people who are participating in things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, and in looking for their loved ones or their ancestors and trying to make a connection in their life journey. And that all of that DNA is fair game for our criminal legal system to use. And so now what they're saying is, and by the way, we don't think that's enough. And we would like, since we over incarcerate and we target Black and Brown community, we're going to make sure that in Prop 20, we're going to make sure we get their DNA at the moment that they are, arrested as well.
Right.
So, I mean, this just speaks loudly to disproportionality and discrimination because it doesn't happen to the white community. And that's very, very important. And I'm not saying that people who give DNA who are white, that their DNA is off limits. What I'm saying is people are overly criminalized in the Black community. And so therefore, they're going to further use Black community's DNA to look for other crimes.
Right.
And that's just not right when you're not doing it to the white community.
Yep. So I'll kind of wrap up. In a perfect society, which we are not in, with a completely equal society, which we are completely not in, then
Right.
be a little more plausible, but it's not, because we are not in a perfect society, and this is a very clearly a very colorblind proposition that doesn't really look into all the factors and thinks it's just a very straightforward, well, yeah, we should make it more criminalized so people don't get away with stuff, but not really looking into any of the other factors or considering the affected groups. It's a very, very close-minded proposition. So yeah, immediate effects, of course. This is a proposition that will instantly take effect. It's not something that counties and stuff would need to prepare for this, of course, but for the most part, this policy could be implemented in a month if they really wanted to, because it's very easy to specify the rules of it. It's not something that would take a year or two to implement, like I believe Prop 19 is. Yeah, it doesn't take as long as like Prop 19 to implement these changes. It could be instant, and there would be instant effects. And yes, increased costs, cost millions, and incarcerate millions just because of, yeah, ridiculous. So that would be the immediate effect. So saying yes would make all of the crimes Jalil specified turn into felonies, and saying no would keep things the same overall. And saying yes also would have the changes with the DNA Lynn explained, and saying no would make it so that things stay the same. And I guess now we get on to talking about Prop 21, which I was kind of confused about. For me, it's kind of there are two sides of it, right? It gives more power to the cities to control rent and on a local level. And this could be a good and bad thing, right? Because it's good because the community can be more involved with the rent control, and advocacy groups like the NAACP can have a better say in how this money is spent locally, and rent control is locally, which I like that aspect of it. But of course, if the officials don't listen, then that doesn't really apply. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword in a way, and that's what it's basically, or that's the basics of Prop 21. So it could do good, but it also could do harm. It really just depends on where you are, who your officials are. So it's kind of, there are positives and negatives. It's kind of it's kind of in an odd place. It's very dependent on where you are. So in Sacramento in particular, I mean, overall, I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like I would hope that these matters would be brought up in city council meetings and with the board of supervisors. But well, yeah, there are some, as we all know, there are some problems with that. So yeah, it's good. There's goods and bads. You guys have anything to add about it?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go first here on just the language of the proposition. Language is yes would allow this ballot to allow local governments to gain control on housing. So, and give them just a little bit more discretionary powers on who and when to enact rent control. Rent control is something that is not necessarily the first option in a lot of communities. When we talk about affordability and the rising price of housing in San Francisco, Sacramento, and all of California, this is something that would allow local governments in the city to execute more power and more control over balancing the amount of prices that landlords are charging for some of the properties. So it is up to the local governments at the end of the day to decide where that line is, whether or not they actually want to, add that line at all to, cap rent prices. And so that is up to, the local governments at the end of the day. But this proposition does give them a little bit more freedom to do that from on its face. And a no vote would oppose this, thereby continuing to prohibit rent control on housing that was on single family homes and different types of properties like that. So this is about expanding rent control, expanding the ability for local and city government to be able to execute rent control. And so is there any unintended impacts or effects that we want to discuss about increasing the power of rent control for local government? How do you guys feel about that? Are you, that is okay, so we have some, we just want to make sure that we have we're clear on what it does. And a yes vote would allow local governments to enact rent control, and a no vote would continue to prohibit rent control on housing that was first occupied after 1995. So that's what these votes would allow. But let's go ahead and let's go to Prop 22, a little bit more of a fertile ground to
This
discuss.
is probably the most famous one.
I don't know. It's definitely got a. I think it has the
Or
most
23.
sentiment.
It's either one of those two are probably the most famous as far as advertisements and
Yes, there's a lot of money that is being pushed into Prop 22 for sure. I heard the number 200 million at between three companies here, which is is a interesting process, a part of the process that much they've been pushing it. But let's go ahead and I can go ahead and introduce this one if that's all right.
yeah, I know you won't talk. Go
So
ahead.
yeah, Prop 22. I would go ahead and call this the independent contractor proposition. And so essentially, um, Prop 22 is about app-based services, and it says a yes vote supports this ballot initiative to define app-based transportation, so rideshare apps and delivery drivers. It would classify them as independent contractors and adopt labor and wage policies specific to app-based drivers and companies. So that's what a yes vote would do. There's already some sort of definition around what an independent contractor is. There's already an idea associated what it means to be an independent contractor for Uber and Lyft, and there's some sort of pride behind that already as well. You get some, you select your own hours. You decide, when and where you want to work. You can kick somebody out of your car. You can put independent contractor on the back seat of your car as well. So these are things that are familiar, but there's a lot packed into this bill. And so a yes would allow app-based companies and app drivers to be specifically reserved as independent contractors, and the laws and the requirements and the benefits that are attached to that are yet to be undisclosed and are continuing to grow. And a no vote would essentially it would place these people that are already in independent contractor status under a general California employee and force app-based companies to disclose them as employees of the company and follow some of the requirements that are followed in the state. So let's go ahead and discuss Prop 22 some bit. So what is the yes argument for independent contractors to want this? Have you guys heard anything about why people are in support of this?
This is one I'm a little less knowledgeable on. This is probably the one I know. No, it's one of the more complicated ones. I know a no argument, but that's about it. I mean, the freedoms it has are going to be kind of taken away with the yes vote. That's all I really know about it. But yeah, that one's hard.
Gotcha. Lynn, do you have any?
I have just a little bit. I mean, I don't have a lot of expertise in this particular proposition, but I do know that this is controversial because ultimately it's about workers' rights.
Right.
And if we really want to think about, again, going back to how I analyze, to me, this is about who's impacted the most, who gains the most, who benefits. And clearly it does seem like there is a beneficiary in this, and it might not be the workers. So is that how you're reading this too?
In some way, I definitely think I think we need to talk about how much money has been poured into this proposition to make that a little bit more clear, because the facts of it are that Uber, Instacart, and Lyft have poured together over 200 million on the yes side of this proposition, and have tried to fight this in the legislature already. This is a fight that they're having to make sure that their employees are independent contractors. And now they want to bring this onto the ballot and ask to see whether or not people want them to be independent contractors, and have poured a significant amount of money in there. And anybody that's pouring money in there, it's fair to say that they have an interest in the outcome, right? So that's what you asked. I was just trying to answer that there.
So is your, I have a question. So is your thinking that, because for me, this is about the employer saying that they don't have to provide certain provisions, even though they're basically treating folks like they're employees and not independent contractors?
That's how I take it as well.
Yeah.
Yes, it seems that if they're in an independent contractor status, that they're not required by the same binding requirements that all other employers are in California.
Right. So it exempts a certain amount, this certain little group of business, right, business people, to not have the same rights as other business people.
Exactly. And it also is something that they've written into this proposition, is that this is a law and a proposition that would take 7/8 of the legislator to amend in any type of way. So this means that however the proponents of this proposition have written up the different requirements or the exemptions for what this company or these type of companies would be required to pay, it's untouchable essentially after this is in place. So we want to be very, very considerate of both sides here and let people know that yes and no can severely determine the outcome of app-based companies in California and the workers' rights that are working for these companies. So just go ahead and check. We're going to go ahead and put some more information at the end of this in on who's sponsoring all these propositions and what the language of the propositions are, of course. And yeah, we're just going to be very clear to make sure that everybody is good, that we're not making a position on this. We just want to make sure that everybody knows that there's two sides, and that this and that there's a lot of money that's being put into it, and that the language of it is on its face allowing app-based companies to not be subjected to a state regulation of that all employers are for employees. So this is a long fought battle that's been happening in the legislature with app-based companies, and it's on the ballot now. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity to inform themselves as best as they can on Prop 22 here. So that is Prop 22 in a nutshell here. So we'll go ahead and put some more details on that at the end of the conversation, but we have a couple more props that to go through really quickly. One of our favorites is coming up at the end here. So we'll try and go through the next couple really quickly before we get to Prop 25.
It helps that Prop 23 overall is pretty simple, so I can run through that. So basically what it'll do is it'll allow dialysis clinics to require a doctor on site in the dialysis clinics. So the immediate effect of that is that dialysis clinics some dialysis clinics that don't have a doctor would begin to be shut down because they've become not legal anymore. So that would happen. And I mean, I believe there are some pretty big names against it. I forget the organization exactly, but it was but there's a lot of organizations against, like medical organizations that are against this proposition.
Right. I think the point, right, is just to make sure I'm understanding, James, isn't the point of this is that if that by requiring a doctor to be on staff, it increases the company's expenditure, which would then make it so that people can't afford to be there because they cost, cost more for the people to go there. And therefore those places will shut down. Isn't that kind of what they're saying?
Essentially, but not just that. With it being applied, you have to, the dialysis, yeah, it's financial, but it's also just general opportunities of finding a doctor. At this point, that's not very easy. I mean, with the way things are right now, being able to, for these dialysis clinics to find a doctor, a suitable doctor for their clinics right now, that's not exactly easy because everyone's kind of, backed up fighting against the greatest pandemic of our time. So doing this right now is kind of weird, just considering everything going on. But that would be an instant effect. And of course, for these dialysis clinics, finding doctors to participate would not be, it wouldn't be an easy task by any means, especially right now. So yeah, that's kind of a general explanation. I'm sure there's more here.
Yes. Let's see.
So I know people on both sides of this, and I think that part of it is looking at it from a public health perspective, that ideally, yes, of course, you'd have a physician at every site. And I think that there are folks on the other side that would say, yes, but practically, if that would be great if we could do this, this, and this. And since we can't do this, this, and this, then it's actually going to put us in danger of having to close a site if we can't find a doctor.
Right.
So those are the two sides that I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I think it's mainly, I think the thing about this prop is mainly the timing. Just this is, as far as health, it's really not the best thing for them to be closed, and finding a doctor is hard. So this is definitely not this is definitely a hard issue. It's not black and white like something like Prop 17 or 18.
Yeah. There are some mentioned and cited health concerns on the yes side, and the no side really is all about the proposition being unnecessary, forcing clinics that are already doing the work, reporting on different infections and reporting on their medical care to the federal government. It would force them to shut down if they didn't have a physician on cost, and they're already able to do the work without the physician. So adding physicians around the clock would only increase costs for these clinics, pushing them to reduce hours or possibly close. And so it feels like the no says that it might put pressure on clinics to organize dialysis workers on the union side. And so the people that are in support of this are the California Labor Federation, and as James mentioned, DaVita and Fresenius is both medical care companies that are in opposition to this, as well as the California NAACP. So we have a no stance on this one, and we can go ahead and say that. So and this, I think the reasoning behind that is that it would protect some of these clinics from staying open and continuing to offer their services.
So could I just also make some comments too on the flip side, just because I know that again, this is a back and forth, right? The other side is, from the public health perspective, is that, sometimes we have to check profiting off of people, especially when we know that there's a disproportionate amount of people who are Black in particular, who actually receive dialysis. And so I think this is one of those things where we really have to get into the weeds and ask some deep questions about, is this more likely than this? And going down that questioning to make sure that we have equity at its core, since we know that there's a disproportionate amount of Black people who are affected by whatever this outcome is.
Right. So yeah, we'll have to be careful about this proposition as well. We're gonna go ahead and post Kyle Matters breakdown. I don't know if y'all have heard of Kyle Matters. Have you, Lynn?
Of course. Love
Yeah.
Cal Matters.
Okay, yeah, Kyle Matters has a lot of different videos and explanations on both sides. The supporters, they have a list of everything from propositions down to statewide positions. They cover a lot of Senate races, congressional races, assembly, and propositions. Those are all very listed and in these cute infographic ways. We'll definitely post that link in here and make sure people can get access to the information on both sides. We can go over the security proposition and then get into our favorite one if that's all right with both of y'all.
I could run. I think this one, and now that I look at it, it's pretty straightforward as well. Actually, I got this. So it amends consumer privacy laws initiative statute. It permits consumers to prevent businesses from sharing their personal information, correct inaccurate personal information, and limit businesses' use of sensitive personal information. And this is the kind of proposition that would go into effect, maybe not immediately, but it would the implementation of this law would be fairly quick because it's pretty straightforward. I like it. I mean, I to be honest with you, I as a consumer, you don't really know how businesses, companies are going to use your information. So I mean, yeah, I'm for it.
It definitely allows for a little bit more discretion for the consumer to decide for certain instances whether or not they want to share certain private information with companies. And just to add, we're in an age where law enforcement and companies are selling information to political campaigns, to just your personal information about what you click on, what you like, what type of websites you view. I don't know if they're listening, into your phone calls. I don't know, but they follow your location services a lot. This is an age of diminishing privacy where your phone and your computer are often subject to endless amounts of information being taken out and received by companies, and that information is then sold to political campaigns and law enforcement for whatever purposes. So this is just something that allows people a little bit more discretion on whether or not they want their information to be, disclosed. But it's just something that we all know at this point that we should all be conscious of, what's going on the internet and what type of stuff we look at on our phones and things like that. Because as we know, this is information that people have access to. The companies have a right to be looking at who is going and sifting through their pages and what they're clicking on and what they're buying and things like that. So, but it is important to mention that we are in an age where privacy is definitely diminishing, and that people don't even know about the amount of information that is being collected on us. So,
I apologize. Go ahead.
No, Lynn, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. Go ahead. Finish.
Oh no, I was wrapping up, and all I was going to say is that Proposition 24 is just an extension of some more privacy rights for consumers.
I would agree. I also kind of have been looking around while you were talking because I am somewhat familiar with this, but I still haven't decided how I'm voting on this one yet. Gotcha. Because this one to me is really hard. And it's because of who's funding it. I always look at who's funding it.
Okay.
And so that's part of it is tech companies are funding this. So I just pulled up one of the voter guides that I really appreciate. I don't agree with everything in the voter guide, but this one, I think that they do a good job really talking about some things. And it's the Sister Circle, the Sacramento Sister Circle voter guide. And I want to read directly from it. It says, but wait, there's more. This proposition removes enforcement of data privacy laws from the California Department of Justice and moves it to a new state privacy commission that will be newly created. First, who is going to sit on this commission that enforces data privacy? And that kind of reminds me of the FDA. You've got all these folks on the FDA who, they have something to gain by whatever they choose to do, right? And so then it says a commission with a budget of only $5 million for enforcement in a state of 40 million people and a gazillion tech companies.
Right.
No, and then it just goes on to say, this just means tech companies can run amok. So, I do want to consider that in my decision making when I'm voting for this. So I'm really going to have to ask more questions.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and I'm going to list out some of the supporters and people in opposition to this from Cal Matters, because they're great.
If you can
Mostly.
that'd be great. Yeah, because
Say again.
no, I was saying for Lynn, you can send that link to that link to that.
Yeah, definitely, I will.
That'd be great because yeah, stuff like that is usually very well hidden in propositions.
Definitely. So yeah, we have to be careful about all propositions and make sure that we're trying to inform voters as best as we can as the NAACP. And one thing that we doesn't get disclosed often is who supports and opposes some of these. And so thanks for bringing that up, Lynn. So I'll just say that the ACLU is definitely in opposition to this. And some people that are in support are the Common Sense Media, a group that promotes safe use of media and technology for children, and consumer watchdogs. So it seems like this is interesting groups that are supporting and against this. So we everybody to go ahead and look more into Proposition 24. Thank you for bringing up that this in some ways brings up a new commission for privacy laws and who's going to be deciding what these laws are. I see that in one of the arguments that I'm reading here, it says passing this proposition will make it harder for lobbyists to change privacy laws in the legislature as well. So yeah, we'll go ahead and make sure that everybody can take a look at this, and then we can move on to our favorite, Prop 25, Lynn and I's personal favorite right now, making sure that we are at the forefront and kind of making a more clear what Prop 25 is about. So I'll go ahead and introduce this one, James. So Prop 25 has been marketed very heavily towards repealing cash bail, and that is all that it will do. It's just repeal cash bail. It's beautifully marketed and designed, right? But I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about the nuances of Prop 25. And so Prop 25 will not, the first word that I'm reading on here is replace cash bail. So it's not just about removing cash bail from the criminal justice system. It's about suggesting a replacement overall in California. And that replacement is a risk assessment and a pretrial assessment tool that is used and based in AI, artificial intelligence, and algorithms to predict whether or not someone is a risk to their community. And so I'll go ahead and allow Lynn to go dig in a little deeper on what this replacement looks like. And I just want to make it clear that this is not just about repealing cash bail, but it's about replacing it with a computerized risk assessment tool. So Lynn, please tell us a little bit more about why, what could be the dangers of that, or if this is this a good replacement? Should cash bail be repealed and replaced? Should it be replaced by this? Like, Lynn, please enlighten us.
Well, again, I'm not an expert, but I have been participating with this particular proposition for several weeks, many weeks now. And I think that this is very hard, because there have been people who've been fighting for decades to get rid of cash bail, money bail. And it's because it's a terrible system. But before I even go there, I want to make a reference to looking at who's supporting and who's not supporting. And one of the things I've learned this year for the first time, really, I was kind of smacked in the face, is that who supports and who doesn't support, I have to look harder at, because in this case, I'm siding with the people I would never, ever support.
Right.
And that I need to make it clear that they put this in a yes or a no format rather than the why formats. And so, yes, I am actually a strong believer that this is going to grow our criminalization system. All the evidence that's come out from Harvard and MIT and other universities are saying that this is just going to grow the system, and that not only that, so there's two parts of this, right? There's more than two parts. There's a lot of parts to this. This is actually much more complicated than it looks. Ending any cash bail is a good. I think that all of us agree that ending cash bail would be wonderful. The problem is that they didn't just end it, as you said at the very beginning, Jaleel. They replaced it. And so they didn't just end it so that we can finally get to a place of let's start from some kind of equity, which we really aren't there anyway because of how we criminalize people and arrest people, but at least that everybody would have the opportunity to, to have some say in their ability to get out. So there was this case too, there was a Supreme Court case called the Humphrey decision, that actually says that you can, and it just happened. So in all of this proposition stuff, this came down as a decision that says that you can now decide on cash bail based on somebody's ability to pay. And it's now a law. And it says that you can do that. And that gives the judges a whole lot of discretion. So if I'm looking at this and saying, do I want to get rid of money bail? Yes. Do I want to replace it with this whole new system? It's literally a system that they're putting in place. The answer is no. And it's because this system, which has already started, there are pilots all over the state, and Sacramento is one of the pilot programs where pretrial assessment tools and services are being, I should say offered. It sounds like a service, but this is part of the system now. It's part of how it works. And so in our case in Sacramento, if you get, and I'm just going to go straight to kind of the situation, the examples. If you get arrested in Sacramento, you're arrested, you go to jail, and then without an attorney, you appear before the judge with this probation department who's done this assessment on you. And that assessment decides based on your previous record, if you have one, or other previous, what they consider to be items that will predict whether or not you will recidivate and return to court, that they will predict on the level of 1 to 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, whether or not you will, which level of supervision you get. And supervision means probation. So it's not called out as specifically probation in the proposition. It is supervision. So basically they use this tool. And so to your point earlier, Jaleel, the tool that they're currently using, even the tools and there are different tools that are allowed, the information put into this tool is artificial intelligence. And they're using information based on pools of people they've already gotten data on to put into this tool. But here's the thing, if we know that we've already created bias in our system by over criminalizing Black people or brown people, then we also, and young people, by the way, over criminalizing young people, then we know that information has gone into the bias, into the artificial intelligence that's part of the tool. And so then that tool will use to predict whether you're a 1 through 6. 1 means maybe you check in with probation once a month, and 4, 5, or 6 means that they can do surprise searches on you, make you do drug tests, and that's an invasion. And by the way, this is all before you've been proven guilty. Right. This is before everything. This is pre-trial.
Right.
So you're put on probation, basically, even at the lowest level. You still have to check in.
Right.
And by the way, if you don't, guess what? You get more charges and you get rearrested.
Right.
So this is a setup. This is a clear setup. It's going to over-criminalize even more. If my choice is, sadly, as awful as it is, because I've been fighting against cash bail for so long, is saying, keep the cash bail. Don't start growing this system. This is like a disease. This is like the virus we're dealing with COVID. One person's going to get it. It's going to spread like wildfire. We're not going to be able to stop it once it starts propagating, or it's like a weed, right? It's going to just start blowing in the wind and seeds falling everywhere. That's exactly what's going to happen with our pretrial service system. We can't stop it. So people who will say, oh, get rid of cash bail first, and then we'll deal with the pretrial. That's not going to happen. It's already invested millions. Sacramento had a 3-year, $9 million pilot. They've already spent $5 million in 1 year of that. And they've hired people. So it's expanding the criminal system. So there's just no way. It's already started, and we've got to shut it down now.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing here is that, and I would just want to take us back really quickly to slavery, and that every time there's an advancement in this American system when it's related to Black people, there's always going to be a new type of struggle or oppression that is either equally as bad or worse, that's trying to incarcerate or trying to oppress that group of people. And so we've seen that here. We're trying to get rid of cash bail. They gave it to us right in the same proposition. And there's plenty of research that's done on AI and risk assessments and using AI in the criminal justice system outside of as a pre-trial assessment. We just know that there's algorithms that are out there that are based on over-policing, based on mass incarceration, based on wrong and biased data. So we know that this is another grab and another opportunity for our society in California to move in a direction of a very slick oppression means. And just to be frank, the people that are in support of this, of course, there's a lot of people that are in support of repealing cash bail, but I'm not even talking about that anymore. Who was in support of Prop 25 and replacing cash bail with this pretrial risk assessment tool? These are people that we need to talk a little bit about and just be clear. The California Democratic Party is in full support of this. Governor, Gavin Newsom is in full support of this. And so when you talk about advocates for Black and brown communities who want to stand up for people, we can go ahead and look at the other side as well. The NAACP is a no to this. And they understand that this is a tool and an opportunity for the government to go ahead and reassign the effects of mass incarceration into a different system, right? The California Bail Agents Association and the Peace Officers Association, as you mentioned, Lynn, are also opposed to this, but the Human Rights Watch is opposed as well. So let's just talk about the advocates that, who've been working on this issue for seemingly a lifetime, get this on the ballot and can't say that they would want to repeal cash bail, because that's not what it's about. It's about replacing it with an equally destructive system. So
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Is that, again, going back to this of my own learning, is that I have to be careful from now on when I see supporters or on which side. I have to do my own research, because what I'm finding is there's an inconsistency and at least for the criminal legal system, people don't understand it. And for people who've been fighting to get rid of cash bail, it's hard to say to people, including myself, right, to say, I know you've been fighting this for decades, and we finally have an opportunity to shut it down. And guess what? We have to give up that opportunity, because we have to stop another system of discrimination from growing out of control, which is worse than this one. Right. And so if I can also add, so my friends over at Justice to Jobs Coalition, Nicole Cuellar and Judy Hyman, wrote this wonderful op-ed where they made 4 really important points. And here are the main problems that we've come up with, and they wrote so eloquently about, excuse me, that this, number 1, it further erodes the key democratic concept of innocent until proven guilty, because we know that every single person gets pretrial services. Gee, it sounds like a great service, right? But every single person who walks in the door mostly gets, I mean, there might be few exceptions, but everyone gets this opportunity for probation before they've been sentenced to guilt. It also uses past data of historically criminalized groups such as Black, Brown, and poor people to create risk models that aim to predict future behaviors, which we already discussed. Number 3, it creates incentives to dramatically expand law enforcement and how incarceration systems, and the incarceration systems at the expense of community services that studies show improve community safety and health. So here again, like another proposition that we talked about, this is basically taking money away from services that actually prevent issues, prevent people from feeling desperate. And so that's a huge point. And then finally, this goes to the Humphrey case, which it permits judges to choose pretrial probation instead of releasing people who are currently eligible for release on bail on their own or their own recognizance. So basically, if they're currently going to be experiencing having to look at bail as their option, Humphrey would kick in and say, oh, how much can you afford? And then the judge is bound then to do it based on that. Or there's something called own recognizance, where they book you and then they arrest you and then they allow you to leave without bail. And that will be totally gone pretty much. It will be rare when someone will not have to do probation. So I think that it's important to note those things. And at the root cause of all of this is also, we have to talk about our judiciary. Our judges, who are elected officials, by the way, are not being held to task. They're constantly siding on the side of fear of, oh, well, all of these people have been arrested, and because the police say they're guilty and because probation says that they're a risk, I'm going to make sure that they're on the highest level of this risk assessment and pretrial service, which means that they're going to be, at the mercy of probation and likely rearrested for making simple mistakes like not calling in on the day where they were supposed to. Oh, that's a rearrest. That makes it even worse for them. So I just wanted to point those things out.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and put some links in the chat really quick just so people can see. So we went to Ballotpedia to get a general description of the yes and no. So we could, have that out here and just explain in the simplest terms that we could what a yes vote and what a no vote meant. So Ballotpedia is a great resource for that. I'm going to go ahead and also add in here just Cal Matters general website. They have, and if you click on some of their menu, essentially on the left with 3 lines, you'll see that they have a list of links that you can click on for the different propositions and different elections that are going on. So I'm going to go ahead and put Cal Matters. Lynn, did you want to, what was the name of that article? I could go ahead and drop a link in here for the article as well, or anything else.
It's what's worse than cash bail, and certainly I'll get that to you. And also, if you were in a great, you actually helped to host a great video that people should see from Human Rights Watch, Silicon Valley Debug, and Encode Justice. And Jaleel, you were great at presenting at the beginning and wrapping us up. And I think that people should see that video.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I want to put that in there. So I'm going to put Justice LA. That was an organization who.
Want me to send you the link?
Yeah, definitely. Can you send it in the chat if you could?
Yeah, I'm looking for it now.
Okay, I have. I just got a link here for. Let's see, copy link on their Facebook page, but I'm sure it's accessible outside of Facebook as well. I mean, here's the Facebook link. It's on, but you can just look up Justice LA. It's one of their most recent posts on Facebook. And you can check out the video on why repealing cash bail with risk assessment is not the best idea. And that's actually very destructive. So that was a great conversation and great video. I've gone ahead and put those 3 links in there. Hopefully when people go ahead and watch this video, the playback, they'll be able to see those links, and or at least they heard us mention where they can go ahead and find that. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. It's been a good hour and over 45 minutes now. Lynn and I were on the phone earlier. James and I were on a document earlier this morning. So we've dedicated a good portion of our morning and afternoon to propositions, trying to educate young people and people everywhere on on the California propositions. This has been a great discussion. We wanted to make sure that we are promoting transparency on both sides of the propositions, being clear on what the vote, a yes and a no vote means, being clear about who supports and who opposes these. And so we've tried to do our best. We've definitely tried to limit the amount of recommendations that we've made. We've definitely mentioned some of the recommendations that the NAACP has, the statewide NAACP has supported, but we are encouraging everybody to do their due diligence, take a look at these propositions, take a look at both sides, see who's sponsoring it, see where you fit into the conversation, and see if you can take anything from what some of the points that we had. So I'll let James go ahead and say anything that he'd like, and Lynn, if you'd like to too, but thank you both so much. James, go ahead, man.
Yeah, and thank you so much for watching. You know, the participation we're trying to make participation as easy as possible, and kind of it's important. And if you don't necessarily live in Sacramento and you have your own community you're doing this for, you absolutely should. And it doesn't have to be just about California propositions. It could be about individual city measures, any way you can engage in the political process, even just tuning in and learning about what the full effect of the propositions are. And that's really all you need to do.
That's right. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining in. We're going to try and make sure that we get this to as many people as possible, similar to how Lynn.
Wait, Lynn, did you have anything to say?
Yeah.
I think you both have done such a great job. Thank you so much for including me today. I really appreciate it. I stumbled through some, but
Lynn,
thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate your help.
Your help and your knowledge on this, and just having you here to discuss has just been an honor. Thank you so much. Lynn is someone that has been a part of the NAACP and has supported a number of other organizations here in Sacramento. And we're just proud to have her a part of the NAACP so she can shine some of her perspective on these issues. And it's been great to work with you again. And so thank you so much.
You too, Jaleel. It's been a long time. Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to continuing to work together, making sure that we're all on the same page in the justice community. So this is what it's about. First and foremost, we want to get our voters informed. So thank you both. It was a great conversation.
Quick announcement. So if you could put me in gallery view about the I'd like to make a quick introduction about the idea of do you think this is a good time? And if not, I'll edit this out. Do you think this is a good time to make an advertisement for the voting day polling station piping up thing that we're planning?
Yeah, let's go ahead and introduce the idea. We don't have too many details on this, but we are very excited to be out and active on polling day. So James, go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
So what we're planning and what we want to plan is having a day on Saturday before the 3rd. The Saturday before the 3rd, what we want to do is we want to go to polling stations, hype people up, have waters, and just generally have a day celebrating the fact that we're out there voting and doing our diligence and doing the best we can in the fight for democracy. So what we wanted to do was have a day where people go to polling stations and just spread the love, spread their beliefs and just be, it just generally hype up people who are voting. Maybe not necessarily, that's really what this is about, democracy, that's kind of what this is for. And to make sure that is the fact that they are fighting for democracy, that idea isn't lost. And there are things that we have specifically. I know we still have waters from our fundraisers. We'll have ice chests and we have a little bit of fundraising money we can use to buy snacks. So it's all in the planning stages, but we hope to make it as big as possible. We can't really disclose too much the specifics of who we'd like to work with, but we would like to make it as big as possible and to get other organizations involved to go to other polling stations. I haven't really picked out the one we specifically will be managing, but hopefully I like it to be somewhere within the city. But we'll see how things go. It's still in alpha stages, but I mean, I would hope it'll be a great experience.
Yeah. So we hope just everybody votes. That's one thing that we can say for sure. We want everybody to go out there and vote. And James and I, and hopefully a number of other organizations, if you decide to go to a polling place or what they're called voting centers now,
Vote center.
yeah, hopefully we can be out there with you guys and passing out and just boosting the morale, and like James said, just to support everybody. So we're looking forward to doing that a little bit forward, but make sure, if you're watching this video, go ahead and check out our SAC NAACP Youth Council Instagram page so you can see the information that we put on there. And this video will hopefully circulate to everybody. Thank you so much, both of y'all. This has been great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Your weekends, please try not to think about props as much as today. So.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jaleel. It's been a pleasure.
Yes,
Signing off.
All right. Bye, y'all.